So just yesterday, the Overwatch team released a ton of new features to the replay viewer. So now, if you bring up the controls, you see there's a new option here, and the shortcut for it is B. And there's a ton, there's a ton of new options that you have. So I'm gonna go down this whole list and try to explain what each of these settings do. So a lot of these settings are related to turning on and off certain parts of the HUD. So if we start at the top with the Team 1 banner and Team 2 banner, these two settings toggle, well, the banners at the top of the spectating client. So you see if I just turn these off, now they're off in the replay viewer. And in a similar vein, the Team 1 heroes and the Team 2 heroes settings just turn off the list of heroes at the top of the screen as well. Now status messages, that's related to the text that shows up in your first person view. So like the text that shows up as stunned or trapped when you get stuck in a Junkrat trap. Or, you know, as Tracer, when you stick someone with your ultimate, it'll say stick, or when you get stuck, it'll say stuck. So if you turn off status messages, that's going to disable those texts. The playback indicators is something that's actually super useful for like anyone who's using the replay viewer. So before, if you wanted to change the speed, as you can see right now, the playback speed, this little annoying thing shows up. And when I try to play and pause, right, this little animation shows up. That's super annoying. And now if you just turn off the playback indicators, look at that. I can change the speed. I can play and pause without having the animation show up. Now the game mode HUD is simply the thing at the top of the screen right there. And that depends on what game mode you're playing, obviously. And I can just turn that off and it goes away. The kill feed setting, that's pretty self-explanatory. You can turn off the kill feed so it won't even show up. The player name settings, obviously, if you look at the people in the replay viewer, they got their usernames over their head. And with that setting, I can just turn it off and now their names won't show up anymore. Now, obviously, it still shows their health bars, which ties nicely into the next option, which is player health bars. And you can turn that off and now it won't show anything over the heads of the players. Now, the player outline strength setting is related to the strength of the outline of the players. So all the people in the replay viewer are outlined in either red or blue based on which team they were on, and it shows up through walls. It's kind of annoying and a bit distracting, so you can turn that off. And you can actually adjust how strong the outline is. So if I just turn it all the way down, look at that. There's no outline on any of the players, which is really nice. And so this next chunk of settings is all going to be related to the first person perspective, starting with first person health. And this will turn off the whole bottom left part of the screen. So, you know, the player's health, their username, and what hero they're playing, and their portrait. So if I go in and then turn it off, it's not there anymore. Now, one thing to note is that if you turn that setting off, it's also going to turn off the shield health display thingy on Brig and Rhine. And that's just specific to Brig and Rhine because no other character has something there. You'd think that Torb's turret health would also go away because it also occupies that same area of space, but it doesn't. And I'll talk later in the video about how to turn that off. Now, the next one is the first person ultimate meter, and this is pretty self-explanatory. It just turns off the ult meter that's sitting in the middle of the screen. First person ability and weapon info, this just turns off the bottom right corner of the screen. So as you can see, it's the player's weapons, their ammo, and their abilities, and you can just turn that off like that. Now the next setting is the first person crosshair, and this is pretty easy. It just turns off the crosshair. So if you see that little green dot in the middle, that's the crosshair that I use for Tracer. And if I turn that off, it goes away. It's important to also note that not only will you turn off the crosshair when you turn off this setting, but it's also going to turn off some parts of the HUD that are near the crosshair. Like for example, Tracer's blinks go away when you turn off the crosshair, Brig's armor packs go away, Doomfist's like crosshair stuff like his seismic slam indicator and the rocket punch thing goes away, and Zarya's charge indicator goes away. Now I didn't test all 32 heroes, but hopefully those would be some helpful examples. Next up is the first person hero HUD. Now the first person hero HUD actually turns off everything that we've discussed previously on its own. So if you want to like wipe out all those things in one setting, it's right there, super easy for you. But this setting also turns off a few additional features, such as the healing or damage boost display thingies that show up when you get those from Mercy, the part of Zen's HUD that lets you know who you're discording and harmony orbing, any shield indicators, so like Rhine, Orisa, or Winston, any crosshair timers like I mentioned previously with Genji and Hammond, and like anyone else that has an ultimate timer, the indicator that shows you how many enemies are nearby when you're on Wrecking Ball for his adaptive shields ability, the thing right below Lucio's Crosshair that shows you how many people you're healing or speeding, Diva's Defense Matrix resource meter, the text that shows up when you're trying to teleport as Reaper, the little animations that show up when you use Hanzo's Storm Arrow, the resource meter for Far's fuel when you try to fly, and Torb's turret health. So all those things are going to be turned off as well when you turn off the hero HUD. Again, I didn't test all 32 heroes, but I mean, at this point, hopefully you kind of get the point of what the hero HUD setting does. There's also one more thing that I forgot to mention. When you turn off the hero HUD, it also turns off those damage spiky things that show up around the crosshair. I don't know what they're called, but it turns off those things, and it also turns off the red skull that shows up when you get a kill. Next up is the first person activity feed, and this is the little text that shows up, I guess, in the lower third area of the screen that shows you when you've eliminated somebody or when you assisted someone or when you all those sorts of little text that shows up there that gets removed when you turn off the activity feed. Now this is another feature that's going to help anyone who's using the replay viewer. So as you can see in this example right here, these players are about to capture the point on the paw, and it makes that sound, right? It's not really a problem until you pause the game and the sound keeps going, and it's super annoying. And when the point is being contested, yeah, it can it can be quite annoying. And now you can just turn that off. So peaceful. Now we're gonna get into the last section here, and these are a bit more I guess I would say advanced features that are really only gonna help a specific number of people, but I still think they're super helpful. So the time skip interval length. Now by default, right, if I bring up the controls, you can either play or pause, or you can skip forward or back by 20 seconds. And sometimes 20 seconds might be a little too much, especially maybe if you missed a certain moment and you have to go back 20 whole seconds. It's kind of annoying. So now you can change how far or back you're going to skip, and you can do it in intervals of 5. So let's say you only want to skip 5 seconds ahead, 10, 15, all the way up to 60. And this is actually a really helpful feature for console players, because what I've heard on console is that when you open up a replay viewer, you actually can't just skip like this throughout the game. So if you want to see something at the end of the match on console, you have to load the game from the beginning, and you have to skip all the way until you reach the end. And now that you can skip ahead in intervals of 60 seconds, that's going to be more helpful for any console people out there. Next one is the FOV change per zoom. Now, if you want to take advantage of this feature, you're going to have to go into your settings and go to your controls section until you find, what's this thing called? The spectate section. And there's going to be a spot here that says modify FOV. And by default, right, this button is set to B, but obviously now the B button is now used as a shortcut to open up the settings for the replay viewer. So you can change it to, I don't know, V if that works for you. Any button really works. This button is only going to be used when you're actually spectating or in the replay viewer. So make sure that the replay is playing, because if you pause it won't work. So make sure it's playing. And if you hold down V, or whatever button that you're using to zoom in, if you hold down that button and you scroll with the mouse, you can zoom in. Look at that. And so it's super helpful for reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. Zooming in is not the same as physically moving the camera closer in order to get a shot. It's going to look different. Now, if you're super zoomed in and you want to immediately go back to the default field of view, you can just double tap the zoom button, and it automatically takes you back to the original FOV for you. And so if every time I scroll up with my mouse wheel, see how it only goes in a tiny bit? Well, you can change how much this zooms in by with every mouse scroll. So if we go in here, and the FOV change per zooms, we can increase it up to 50%. So every mouse scroll, 1. See how far we zoomed in with just one mouse scroll? We're going to scroll in one more time, 2, and zooms in a ton. So it's super, so now you can zoom in much faster. So that option really isn't going to change the lives of most people, but it's just, again, a very nice option to have. Now the next setting is called the field of view interpolation rate, or I hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, if someone in the comments knows more about this than I do, please feel free to let me know exactly what this is. But in the simplest of terms, it's basically how fast or slow the zooming in is. So I'm just going to show you what it's like at 100%. Ready? So I'm just going to zoom in once. And that's one scroll right there. See that? Zoom in, zoom out. That's what it's like. And now I'm going to turn it down all the way to 0%. And this is what it's like. Ready? It's very slow. It's a very slow, gentle zoom in and zoom out. And again, if I ever want to go back to the default view, I just double tap V and it takes me back, although much slower than usual. So it's a bit of a confusing feature, but again, you can play around with it. I definitely will be, and you can just kind of change how fast or slow that you zoom in. Again, it's not a very useful feature for most people, but it's very nice to have. And finally, the last change is the maximum free camera FOV. So basically, when you're in the free camera, as in like right now, right, third person camera, free cam, when you're not spectating a person, you can set the maximum field of view. So right now it's at 70, which I think is the default, and this is what it looks like right now. But you can increase it all the way up to 90. So we're gonna see what that looks like if I double tap V to zoom out again. Ready? So there you go. So now it's just a slightly wider thing. Again, I'm going to say it again. It doesn't really affect most people, but it's just a nice way to have, so you can further zoom out and have an ultra wide, I guess, field of view when you're spectating certain things. And obviously, if you want to go back to the default settings, you just push the reset button and it goes back to the ugly HUD-filled mess that we originally had. Now, one more super helpful feature is that, let's say like this is your preset, these settings will save in between matches. So if I go back to the main menu, let's say I want to spectate a different replay that I had, it will save those settings. So see, now look at that. It's going to save the settings that I had in the first game, which is really helpful. So maybe you can set like what you want and you never have to change it. So I hope this video did enough explaining. Hope you guys understood all this stuff. I'm just incredibly excited for like what these new options hold for a lot of at least creators out there or observers. It's just super exciting to see what people are going to do with this stuff. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys.